I think my research is in line with a number of sort of directions that the field as a whole is taking, and one of those avenues is what's called translational research, meaning trying to connect the symptoms of mental illness to all of the intermediate steps in the brain, brain circuit function, how neurons, cells function, how the proteins in those cells function, how the genes determine which proteins are expressed. So connecting all of these levels is really critical, and that's a major general thrust in the field that my work is really trying to push in a specific way of relating specific symptoms to these specific brain circuits. And then once that's possible, we know a fair amount about the molecular and genetic influences on these brain circuits, so kind of building these bridges. And another area is that the description of symptoms, we do the best we can as psychiatrists in evaluating symptoms and describing them as people report them or as we see them. But those descriptions are probably too rough, too general. They probably cover what are actually different underlying biologies. And so another big thrust in the field is to move beyond sort of the diagnostic symptoms that we use now and try to separate them out by connecting them to different kinds of biologies. It's kind of like in the old days in pneumonia. You could say, well, you have pneumonia because you have a cough and a fever, but there are 1,000 kinds of pneumonias that depend on what infectious agent you have. And if all we could say is you have a pneumonia, we would never be able to treat it effectively because we wouldn't know what antibiotic to choose. So I think being able to break down those symptoms into specific causes will allow us eventually to get to that point where we can treat the causes, which will be much more effective than where we are now, which is just treating the symptoms as best we can. So I think that is a different way of it's a different perspective. We're sort of saying the same thing. So translational research, the word translate, it means translate from the research laboratory to the clinical bedside. And also backwards, it means taking what we learn as clinicians at the bedside about what patients, what individuals with illness experience, and using that to translate into research questions that are focused on specific questions that are really key to the illness. And what I was saying about connecting the levels of symptoms to neural circuits, to cells, to proteins, to genes, is a way to achieve that goal of translation, that in order to make that translation successful, we need to move among those levels and relate them in a way that we haven't yet been fully able to do.